Hi, I'm Brian from Atomic-Moto, and this is our review of the Gaerne SG-22. Let me dive into the construction of the SG-22. First of all, I am a fan of the way that Gaerne designs a boot. They are very efficient. They use a smaller number, lesser number of plastic pieces and components in general to get to their finished product designs. They are very clever in how they design it. You can see it if you begin to sort of reverse engineer their boots compared to some other brands. And that's a really good thing. This boot continues that tradition. But first of all, let me talk about the plastics of it. Gaerne is known for, on their high-end boots especially, having lots of plastic coverage, and this boot is almost entirely covered in plastic. That is a very good thing because you have lots of support and protection. However, because of the way that the plastic pieces are designed and because of the mechanical hinge, the boot still has great flex. The mechanical hinge, first of all, Gaerne's high-end boots, this one use a 4-pivot mechanical hinge, 2 on the outer and 2 on the inner side. It works really well, has lots of flex fore and aft, and somehow they have built a system into this boot where it actually has a tiny amount of side-to-side flex. Let me explain that to you. If you were to stand on flat ground and keep your soles perfectly flat, you'd be able to rock a little bit side to side and the boot flex with you. Why is that good? Because it helps your feet stay flat on the foot pegs when you're moving around on the motorcycle. The hinge is connected to what Gaerne calls a Razorback system. I'll zoom that out here for camera 2. It is a series of overlapping pieces. This main component here comes around and attaches to the second buckle, goes around and sits over the rear Achilles, and then comes up here and nests into the upper plastics. And I'll flex that for you a little bit so you can see what that does. But it basically gives it really good movement. And then, in addition to that, this piece still wraps very snugly around your ankle. The inside of the boot is nice and smooth. There's lots of surface to grip the motorcycle. It has a silicone insert here around the ankle. That's the one that I use. And then it also has a silicone insert here as a burn guard where you can grip the frame. The shin plate is adjustable. It has 3 screws here, and you can take those off and relocate them to another set of holes. And what that does is it increases the circumference around the calf to either accommodate people that have a larger calf size, a large knee guard or knee brace, or just want a little bit more room. The second thing are the new buckles. Like I said, these definitely have a more, you might even be able to hear it. This, much more positive click than this. Yeah, this is pretty soft. The click on these buckles is definitely not as robust as the SG-22. These feel better. They have a little bit more positive lock. It's possible that the mold was just worn out on the other boots, and so they redid the levers, and that's given them a better action, but it's really much nicer like the buckles. In addition to that, it has multiple buckle position holes here. I'll set this out for camera 2. Multiple buckle position holes here, so you can take this buckle and you can move it either farther forward if you need more room, or farther back if you want a little bit more cinching for a smaller calf adjustment. Incidentally, this is one of a few Gaerne boots where you can cinch it down pretty snugly to wear without a knee shin guard tucked in, and to wear underpants. That's a nice change. It is a 4-buckle boot, no skimping on the buckles, and incidentally, this is a new buckle design for Gaerne. It uses the same female strap. Everything else is the same, but the lever actually has been redesigned to be a little bit lighter, and it actually has a better action. It has a much more positive lock, much more friction to it, and it feels better when you're opening and closing it. These buckles are excellent, and I like them better than the SG-12. The sole, still a welt sole design. Our favorite method of sole attachment, sole construction, still a welt sole design. This is a more expensive way to manufacture a boot. It is more durable, it is more protective, and it can be resoled. But they have a new design on the sole with a new pattern on it, and that's good. There is some cushioning material. This insert here under the heel and this insert here under the forefoot is a softer density. Now that's not the outsole, it is actually a cushioning layer in between the sole base and then the bottom sole. And that gives it a little bit more cushioning for severe impacts. The boot has lots of memory foam. This is one of my favorite features about high-end Gaerne boots. They don't skimp and use polyethylene foam. They use a really expensive, really durable, really cushiony memory foam in the ankle area, and all around this zone of the boot. It extends down into the forefoot. The question we've gotten quite a bit already, and I'm sure it's on your mind, what are the changes from the SG-12 to the SG-22? Well, first of all, if you notice, these are used. I spent a good amount of time in them, and then we spent some time taking them and poking and prodding with screwdrivers and Allen wrenches and measuring tapes and things like that to see the differences in construction. But let me start with the thing that is in Gaerne's literature the most. They talk about the 3D toe box. And what that seems to be, from my interpretation, is if you look at the front of this toe, right there, and on camera, let me get it down for camera 2. If you look at that, it is very blunt in the front. It is just almost straight up and down. It doesn't have as much taper as the SG-12 had and some other boots. What that does is it gives you a little bit more vertical height in the forefoot, and it actually squishes your toes less. This boot fits a little bit better around the forefoot because it has a little bit more vertical height. Second thing is a redesigned Razorback. I'm going to show you these two boots here. Back to back. The Razorback is slightly different. If you look, you can see that they're a little bit more aggressive in the spacing. There's a little more range of motion on the 22 compared to the 12. The 22 actually sticks out a tiny bit more in the rear. So the Razorback is slightly different. Spinning them around and grabbing these two. The shin plate is actually a little bit larger on the 22. Here's the shin plate on the 12. You see it's to about here. The 22, if you notice, the shin plate, which goes underneath the second buckle strap, is a good chunk larger. It actually has a little bit more coverage, a little bit more protection. This strap nests over the top of it, so you wouldn't quite notice that. But the shin plate is larger. And that brings me to the most significant difference between the SG-22 and the SG-12. If you look closely at this bottom strap, the number 2 strap, and the number 3 strap compared to the position on the 12, they are lower on the SG-22. They have moved the position of those straps a little bit farther down the boot, and thus they have also relocated the flex zone where your boot bends and compresses here when you flex forward or flex backward. Now the interesting thing about it is the buckles are actually in the same location, but the position of the lower strap on the 22 has moved down the boot a little bit and has a slightly different angle. In addition to that, the position of, let me see, I want to show you the outside of this. The position of the hinge pivot on the 22 is slightly higher than it is on the SG-12. And what it appears that Gaerne has done is discovered by lifting the hinge pivot a tiny bit and moving the flex zone of the boot, the fulcrum of the flex zone, down a little bit, that the boot has easier fore and aft flex. And then there are a few things that we actually could not figure out. Now, in the literature, Gaerne says that there is a 2-position limit on the range of motion for the Razorback, for the hinge. And try as we may, we pulled a bunch of covers off and tried looking underneath things. We could not find where those adjustments are. Apologize for that, but we couldn't figure it out. Maybe if one of you figure it out later, you can post it in the comments of this video. Another thing is Gaerne said that the weight was reduced on this boot, and we can see some things that they've done to reduce the weight. On the scale, though, they weigh about the same. I'll post the picture of the two side by side, but there's no difference in weight. The other thing is they talk about improved ventilation. Now, there are some vents here, and there's a little bit of mesh underneath it, but they go to a polyethylene piece underneath. Once it's heated and compressed like it is inside of here, doesn't really work that much. So I really wouldn't call that a true system of ventilation. I think it's a little bit more marketing hype than anything. Fit questions are super important. What is the difference in fit between these two boots? Well, they're pretty darn similar. I notice a slight amount more comfort initially, more volume, I would say, initially because of the 3-dimensional toe box. But it's not an order of magnitude. It's just a small incremental difference. And I wear my boots in size 46. I'm a little bit aggressive in that. I'm really probably closer to a 46.5 or even a 47 in some models, but in Gaerne I'm able to wear a 46. And it takes a little time until the footbeds usually kind of compress and allow my heel to go down and sink back before I have enough room. I was a little bit I'm better off on my first ride on this boot than I would be in an SG-12, but they really do fit about the same. And the most important summary statement I can make about that is the SG-12 is not a super wide boot. Gaerne has a reputation for being wide. People paint with a broad brush across the entire brand all the time. That's wrong. You need to look at the individual model, individual product when you're studying fit. And this one is a little bit on the wide side, but not as wide as, for example, Gaerne's SG-10s or fastbacks. Now, another difference between the 12 and the 22 is because this buckle strap is down a little bit lower than it is on the SG-12, this one gently presses down on the top of your foot. There's some padding underneath there, so it's not a harsh pressure, a hard pressure, but it gently presses down on the top of your foot and feels like it is held in place much more securely. There is a noticeable, the strap on this one almost sits a little bit up into no man's land, kind of in the transition from the foot to the leg. And so you feel a little bit of extra space between the shell of the boot and the top of your foot. And in some cases, I can put a footbed in there. On this one, I'd never need to because you're just held in place a lot more securely. Time for some conclusion statements on the Gaerne SG-22. Now, I have about 5 rides, probably about 12 plus hours of time in these. Good base of information for me. I have lots of experience in SG-12, so I really kind of understand this boot quite well. And how do they compare? What do I like about them? Well, first of all, they do have a fairly similar feel. There's lots of design characteristics that they did on this that they also do on the new SG-22, but they have iterated them and improved them. The way that the hinge works, the Razorback, the way that this piece is all one is really the same on both boots. But the SG-22, by virtue of its improved or modified pivot location and strap placement, this boot flexes downward and upward a lot easier, and noticeably so. This boot was great, but it was a little bit on the stiff side, and if you felt that this boot was stiff, then this is going to be a welcome change, a welcome improvement. The range of motion within its intended arc is very good on this. However, it still has that excellent lateral support because of these overlapping pieces of plastic. It still has great bib support. In addition to that, one thing, I can't go by without mentioning this. The killer app of an SG-12 or an SG-22 in this case is that ankle foam, that memory foam in the ankle. When you strap into a pair of these, it is just an immediate feeling of support and security and, of course, quality. And that has not changed at all, in fact, and that is one of the best things about this. You just have that little slide your foot in, it goes shunk, and then you hit the bottom, cinch it down, and your ankle immediately feels cradled in this memory foam and in the chassis of the boot. The sole feels a little bit more tactile. The boot isn't really lighter, but it feels a little bit lighter. That could be placebo effect, or it could be the combination of maybe a slightly different compound, a little bit easier flex, and then the fact that it's new. But it does feel a little bit more athletic and a little bit more agile on the bike. The quality of a Gaerne boot is something that should not be overlooked. These guys are old school and are not dropping the bar. In fact, they raise the bar constantly. And other manufacturers should really try to be as diligent about making a great product and not just trying to make it cheaper as these guys are. That's a fantastic thing. There's a couple things about it that are not fantastic, but they're not really bad either. This isn't really venting. Looks like it is, but I don't really think it works. Oh, and by the way, we still did not find a way to limit the range of motion on the hinge. So if anybody comes up with that, please post it in the comments or send it to us so we can kind of know, because Gaerne wasn't able to tell us either. Everything else about it is just fantastic. The only other negative about it that I can probably say is the fact that it's a pretty darn expensive product. But we feel that there's a bigger difference in what you pay for and what you get in boots than there are in other safety gear. For example, the difference, in our opinion, between an inexpensive helmet and an expensive helmet is not as vast as between a boot. These are more complicated products. There's more pieces to them. There's more hand labor. less stuff made with machines, and so there's a little bit more justification, I would say, for these being more complex and thus more expensive. Everything else about it we really liked, and if you're looking for the best motorcycle footwear when you're going to go into the dirt, boy, you should take a real hard look at these because they are awesome and they are my favorite. And with that, I'm going to wrap up my review of the Gaerne SG-22. We are Atomic-Moto, www.atomic-moto.com, home of the bombers. And I'd like to say at the end of every video, we hope to see you out somewhere on your bike.